It's 9 o'clock on the button, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Governmental Affairs and Public Information Committee on Friday, November the 15th. Before we begin, please note this meeting is being recorded. Welcome to my colleagues and everyone joining us in person, as well as those listening on the telephone. If you'd like to provide public comment at today's meeting, and if you have not done so already, please let Thomas in the back of the room know, or Justine on the call line know what items you'd like to speak on today. Madam Secretary, can you kindly call the roll?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to start with Director Dorsey, who's absent. Garbarina.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Rabbit.
Here.
Verdoni.
Here.
Sefai is absent. Vice Chair Giudice.
Here.
Chair Snyder is absent. President Cochran.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum, and we are exactly a committee of the whole. Also in the room, we have Directors Crosbold, Maston, Parr, and Furio.
Perfect. Let's start with agenda item number 3, which is a state update from the district's Legislative Advocates Platinum Advisors, LLC. And Steve Wallach is here to present. Good morning, Steve. Welcome. I know it's been a quiet week. Please enlighten us.
Just beginning. Well, good morning. Steve Wallach, Platinum Advisors. It's great to see you all again. To be down here to give you a little update on Sacramento stuff, but everything that kind of overflows federal level as well. So this past year, we had a huge budget deficit, so it was about $40 billion. So a lot of budget cuts were made, suspensions to bridge that gap. So far, this fiscal year, I would say the fiscal outlook is stable. Revenues are coming in a little higher than what they expected, but not enough to really say that there's going to be a surplus. A lot of the suspensions, the Prop 98 suspensions, will probably gobble up a lot of what extra money there is. Right now, we're about $7 billion above, about $8 billion above what was expected, but that's not enough to make up for what they had to reduce last year. But so far, things are looking good. The legislative analyst has its fiscal outlook report that should come out probably next week, I expect, and that will give their idea what they see coming up in the future, whether there's going to be problems for that. So one of the other things we did work on this past year was seismic retrofit funding. We've been working on that for more than 1 year. It's been quite a haul to try and locate and convince people to fund the remaining gap. With the securing the $400 million in federal funds, that I think did help us at the state level to find extra funds. We were seeking about $250 million. The state finally, through the leadership of the governor's office and Pro Tem McGuire, were all very helpful in trying to encourage Caltrans and CalSTA to kind of examine where they could find this funds. We did provide them a roadmap for how they could do it, but they decided not to go that route and just looked at existing resources. So they did commit. What we're going to say is $149 million. They counted as $200 million because there's $50 million that we thought we already had that they're planning towards that. So with that, we got $149 million, hopefully enough to close that gap. We do realize that was far short of what our goal was, and that there are the hardships at the district level to try in order to meet that. I think people at Sacramento level understand that we may need to look at them again if there's other funding sources to try and reduce that impact to district operations. So they're open to that. It depends on the fiscal outlook of the state and whether there's resources there. Having said that, you all are aware of the federal elections within the administrations. Folks are coming in. There's a lot of concern about what implications that's going to have for California. While our state finances might look good, we don't know what's going to happen at the federal level regarding the federal funds from hundreds of sources coming into California and how that might be impacted. And as I'd say, at risk is that $400 million grant. So we need to tie that down, and we'll work with the general manager on trying to encourage Caltrans to get that done, to get it as obligated as we can, as soon as we can. There's the governor was back in D.C. this week, working on several things on requests to try and get those out. I'm sure there's a lot of other states doing the same thing. So it's a matter of trying to get that completed and as obligated as we can. Even if we have a funding agreement, it doesn't mean they have to give us the money. So we want to try and secure as much as we can. So while that was a big success in getting the state funds and getting this done, this is a new risk that we have to kind of address as we move forward. Also, this past year, there's several bills we watched. I'm not going to go through all of those, but just highlight a couple of them that one of them we co-sponsored, AB 2061. This is with Assemblywoman Lori Wilson. This would have provided a state sales tax exemption for the purchase of zero-emission ferries. It's been tried, the prior year got held in suspense. This year, the bill did get all the way to the governor's office. Unfortunately, the governor did veto it because of the fiscal outlook of the state. We took a very hard-line look on a lot of bills this year regarding anything that had a fiscal impact, so it was vetoed. So we'll have to check with her office whether she's going to want to try it again if the fiscal outlook looks better. Other bills, SB 960, this is by Senator Wiener. This is what they call a complete streets bill that also has a lot of transit components in it. This is something that he did a few years ago. The governor vetoed it, directed Caltrans to adopt guidelines at the department level. A lot of folks feel that didn't go far enough, or they weren't being implemented. So this is another attempt. It was signed into law, so it does direct Caltrans to consider complete streets not in transit facilities on other state highway operations program, funding programs, and a lot of other and kind of a transit kind of priority kind of policy when they develop their expenditure plans. So that is now on the books, takes effect on January 1st. So it should be beneficial to the state. Looking for next year, the beginning of this year, there's a lot of discussions about the regional measure for funding transportation. That is still potentially, going forward next year. MTC is trying to work on a region-wide plan and see if they can get a region-wide consensus first before they come up to the state level. So that is still on the horizon for next year. Sort of never easy, even if there's a regional consensus by MTC. It doesn't mean all the members agree to it. And so there's always a lot of negotiations and horse trading going on as that legislation makes its way through. Complicating that matter is, the removal of the housing bump that was supposed to be on the ballot this year. It's also pushed it back to be kind of competing with the transportation or transit funding proposals. So it's going to be, whether that's going to have to reduce in scope or how they're going to work that out remains to be seen. So at that, I'll leave it at that for any questions on any other bills that I didn't mention or anything else.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from my fellow directors? Yep. Director Masson, please.
Yeah, I have two questions. This is probably more for Dennis. Do we have a plan for that $100 million shortfall other than hope?
So the board adopted a funding plan for the project in September. And when they adopted the funding plan for the project, they committed tolls with the understanding we would pursue other grants. So the next item after this one is our legislative platform for next year. And our number one advocacy is for seismic funding for two reasons. One is because we didn't achieve as much as we did. Although it's important to note that to get $149 million of new money when the state has a $40 billion deficit, and they were robbing from the highway account for any program they could that was general funded that they wanted to minimize cuts, is a tremendous achievement. But they're very clear when we got $149 million, they said this was the best they could do at this time. Steve and I repeat that all the time. But so you approved it. It has $100 million extra of reserves than we originally contemplated. So that is the action of this board. It's important to note that, that's where we are today. We're in negotiations with the contractor. We're looking at the scope of work. Cal OSHA adopted new regulations dealing with lead in the workplace that take effect January 1st. And if you have $1 million square feet of painting that you're going to be doing as part of that project, if the cost is $70 a square foot, $100 a square foot, or $250 a square foot, it's a big swing. And so we are working through all that. So we know not just for the $100 million, but potentially for pressure on the project with, the state imposing new requirements that will affect how you do the work are things that we want to talk to Sacramento about. So the next item we'll talk about that. But you did commit in September that $100 million of toll dollars so we could sign the funding agreements with the state and the feds to lock in the money.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. The last question is, I'm sorry, one other. AB 2669 on tolls. Does that have a sunset like it has in the past?
I don't think it does.
No,
I don't think it does.
It does not.
Yeah.
And the state was helpful in getting us $149 million of new money. It's kind of like, the governor vetoed the bill on sales tax exemptions for electric ferries. Are we upset about that? He gave us $149 million. And so you have to be pragmatic and you have to focus on what you want. And if you're only going to get one thing, I think getting $149 million was the right thing to ask for. So we told the author that if it didn't have a sunset, we would not object if he would support our ask for additional funding from the state. We can always go back and, try to change the law in a couple of years if we wanted to. The author is termed out, but at this juncture, I believe the board is comfortable with the legislation as it was enacted and signed.
Okay,
Great. Thank you.
Director Abbott?
Yeah, Des, I think our goal was on the local match for the seismic was 20% or less. And right now we're at what, 28?
Our goal was 20% and we're above that by the extra $100 million we put in. The exact percentage, we didn't want to put in the staff report because we didn't want the state then to use that percentage if there was a cost increase due to the OSHA stuff. So we intentionally, Joe had me delete that from the staff report and he was right. He goes, if you do that, this is how it's going to be used against us in the future.
But it's in that range.
It's still a very good, match ratio.
And just remind us again, the dollars that were projected on that project were how many years out, or are they today's dollars?
No, it's the $870 million estimate was the estimate when we approved the funding plan, and that I think contemplates that construction would start next year, which is our goal. So that's what we put in place.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Madam Secretary, would you see if there's any public comment?
We've checked the public line. There's no public comment on this item.
Okay. No action is required. That concludes this item. We'll move on to item number 4, which is to approve the implementation of the district's 2025 legislative platform. And our general manager is here to kick off the report. Please.
Thank you, directors. The item before you is something that we bring to you every year, which is to approve a broad platform for our legislative advocacy so that as things happen quickly in Sacramento, Washington, D.C., we have the ability to send a letter to the author saying we oppose this or we support this. So we have a broad platform. And so we are working actively with Platinum Advisors for Sacramento for next year, as well as with Paul Schlesinger for our federal advocacy next year. And so what we have before you is kind of that broad framework that we're seeking your approval. If you read the memo after you get through the little summary, it says very clearly that the main focus is seismic retrofit. While we were $100 million less than we desired, we want to seek extra funds. The practical reality is that we'll be probably seeking that money from regional and state sources as opposed to federal sources. But it's important to list it in case things change. Also, we highlight that the state of California has adopted a commercial hovercraft rule, the California Air Resources Board has, that necessitates that we replace all of our ferry boats. So we're buying one new ferry boat, the Liwa, and then to replace all the others is a significant undertaking. And so we have some federal formula money for that, but clearly we'll need to be aggressive in getting money. And I'll come back to that item in a minute. I want to talk a little bit about the change in the federal landscape. We are coming out and navigating still the long tail of the pandemic. Bridge traffic is down about 15%. Morning commute's down about 25% every day. So we have less money coming in from bridge tolls and transit fares with less travel in the corridor. So we are actively engaged with others in the regional discussion about a potential regional measure. We're also realistic, though. We're pragmatic that, we may be on our own when the dust settles and all this, either because nothing makes it out of Sacramento, or nothing that makes it out of Sacramento makes it through the public, or that what makes it out of Sacramento is more narrowly focused on the agencies that have the largest deficits, which primarily is BART and SFMTA. And even there, the MTC Steering Committee's latest recommendation, or the Commission's latest recommendation, may fully or mostly solve BART and maybe solve less than half of SFMTA's challenge. But we're very actively engaged in all that. We are a regional operator. And so if there is some regional measure that does incorporate all of our counties, we're cognizant of that. But we're also cognizant that we don't want to do anything that interferes with SMART achieving their reauthorization. Because when people talk about a fiscal cliff in the Bay Area, the most immediate and drastic fiscal cliff is in early 2029 when SMART ceases to collect revenues. And so SMART, Golden Gate, Marin Transit, and the other operators and the county transportation agencies and Marin and Sonoma are aligned in this, and we're all advocating at the regional level collectively on that. And so whatever the SMART board decides with respect to whether or not Marin and Sonoma are part of it is something that we feel is appropriate to go along with, because it's in our best interest to see SMART, not just to live to see another day, but to continue to thrive and grow ridership. Other things that are listed here in the table, there's a lot of detail about that. But it is important to note that at a federal level, probably the most important thing we need to do is keep what we have. Just briefly, at a federal level, I think in the coming months, we will learn more about the true extent of the legal authority of executive orders, because executive orders are something the president can do pretty easily. We know prior presidents have done certain things. President Ford did a executive order that banned project labor agreements, for instance, on federally funded projects. So there's all sorts of things that may be coming down the pipeline. We don't know. It is speculation, but it's clear that the new administration is interested in using the maximum authority it has to do what it feels is appropriate based on its values. And so executive orders is one way that we may see some changes coming out. Another way we may see changes coming out is in the regulatory process. I mentioned that we have to replace our ferry fleet to satisfy the California Air Resources Board commercial hovercraft rule. Well, that commercial hovercraft rule requires an exemption from federal EPA to have something different than the rest of the country. And so the new administration, as part of the regulatory process, may make changes that impact us. While California is at the vanguard of addressing the climate emergency, the new administration and the new congressional majorities have not expressed the same urgency or, dare I say, even concern for those policy initiatives. And so we should be cognizant of the fact that that could affect us in two ways. One is, grants to achieve our objectives, and two is just having a policy framework in California that allows us to do certain things. And so I just wanted to get that out there. The incoming administration has expressed an interest in making the executive agencies more aligned with them, and they've expressed interest in making the nonpartisan civil service go away. Whether or not they achieve that, we don't know. But they could reduce the staff in agencies so they can't do their work. They could relocate agencies from, say, Washington, D.C. to, Kansas City, and then they'd have a lot less staff available to do the work, whether it's processing grants or doing their regulatory jobs. So we just need to be cognizant of all that. Discretionary grants and earmarks discretionary grants controlled by the administration. We've done quite well in discretionary grants. We should anticipate that in the next few years. Discretionary grants that are subject to the administration's approval are likely not to come our way. I don't think that's a stretch or a reach to say, even though we could say we're a red bridge in a blue state. Earmarks.
Let's have people stand up there, Rick. Yeah.
We need money. So discretionary grants are something that we should not anticipate, except for small programs. Some small programs are below the radar screen. They're not as competitive. But the big raise grants, if those programs survive, we should not anticipate that they'll be coming our way because we've applied for many of those. Finally, the reauthorization is something that on the natural, the discussions should start next year. The bipartisan infrastructure law sunsets in September of 2026. So next year, Congress should start talking about it. The last time Trump was president, they never did a transportation authorization. If that happened again, it would not necessarily be a bad thing because existing programs may then stay in existence and they may kick the can down the road. But a part of our legislative platform is talking about reauthorization. Practically speaking, we want to make sure that the bridge program stays, it thrives. We may want to see increases in the funding levels for the ferry boat discretionary program. When we put out our bid in the coming months for the new ferry procurements, hopefully some Gulf state shipyards bid on it, just to be pragmatic. And then also the new administration and the new majorities in Congress have indicated that they will be doing reconciliation bills late winter, early spring next year. They're going to do one on taxes and one on spending. Just to remind everybody that Congress can do up to 2 reconciliation bills a year. Reconciliation bills bypass the filibuster in the Senate so that you can get a bill through with just 51 votes. On the spending side, as part of reconciliation, they may seek to defund programs or to claw back money that has not been spent. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. So I just wanted to get that out there that, the federal landscape is quite different from even the last time Trump was president. They will control all the houses, they being the Republican Party, and they have expressed some priorities that are different from, what we are interested in. But the framework before you deals with federal and state opportunities, and we think what we have is broad and is respectful of your initiatives, our organization's funding needs, and we respectfully ask that you approve the item before you. And with that, I can answer any questions after delivering all that less than positive news.
Thank you, Dennis. Questions of the general manager? Please.
I did. Would you remind us when that deadline is under the California Air Resources Board for the new fares?
So we did a presentation to you, I think, in September, where John Ray came, and I'd have to pull up that slide and send it to you. But we are replacing them over time. If the CARB rule gets rejected, we may not need to replace all of them. We don't have money to replace all of them. We still may want to replace all of them. But getting federal funds to replace all of them may be different in the new administration. But we're putting out to bid a contract that would have 2 boats, 1 new boat and 1 replacement for the Del Norte. We'd have options for the remaining 6. And we have almost all the money for the first 2 boats. It's a big enough contract that may spark some interest. But it's in response to a CARB rule. That CARB rule took effect January 1, but it does technically require an EPA exemption that has not yet been granted, though it may be granted in the next 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Further questions? Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis, for the report. Could you remind me what federalizing the Larkspur Ferry Channel?
Sure. It's something we've had on the books for a long time, and it's something that may not be as beneficial as it sounds. But right now, the Larkspur Ferry Channel is not federalized. What that means is the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has not determined that it's a navigable channel for commerce. If they make that determination, then it would be eligible to be done to dredge as part of the port cycle. The fact that you're eligible doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be dredged on any regular frequency. The Petaluma River is eligible, the San Rafael channel is eligible, and they don't get dredged nearly often enough. Historically, we've used Federal Transit Administration monies that we get to dredge the Larkspur Channel. We dredge it about every 5 years. We have to dredge it to maintain our vessels. And if we could make it a federal channel, it would mean that sometime, someday, there may be an opportunity when Congress has a big funding package for dredging it, we could get that money, and then we could shift those formula money we get from FTA for other district needs. Previously, the Corps did 2 kind of dredging episodes. When Senator Boxer was chair, then Senator Boxer chair of the Environmental Public Works Committee, we got an earmark, and it was supposed to be 1 dredging episode. They didn't get it quite done in 1, but they got it done in 2. And then we later added some language that had the Corps do a study. The Corps would have to do a study, cost-benefit or benefit-cost analysis to determine whether or not it's prudent. They did that when they did the prior dredging episode about 18 years ago. But if they did that, then we could be eligible, that we shouldn't hold our breath that it's going to provide any financial salvation soon, but we always play the long game.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Madam Secretary, anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item?
We have no speakers for this item.
Okay. That concludes the discussion on this item. May I have a motion on agenda item 4 to approve implementation of the district's 2025 legislative platform?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Okay. We'll do a vote by affirmation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries with no opposition. Move on to the next item, which is public comment. Madam Secretary, anyone wish to address the committee on anything else?
We'd like to give the public one opportunity to actually chime in. So I'm going to pass this over to Justine to try and pull the public line because I think a number of people have joined. So just to make sure they're not here for the 10 o'clock board meeting, we want to make sure that we give everyone an opportunity. Justine, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Good morning. If you've joined and you'd like to speak at the GAPI meeting this morning, please use ** to unmute yourself and let me know. Again, if you'd like to speak at GAPI this morning, please use ** to unmute yourself and let me know. I am not hearing anyone this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've reached the end of the agenda. Thank you, everyone. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved, Rabbit.
Second?
Second.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.